to summarize, we're looking at high proof, no peat, high sherry. Welcome to Whiskey and SV. I'm your host Sam, and tonight I'm joined by my good friend Matt.
Hi everybody.
And Matt is mostly a bourbon guy, and I'm trying to introduce him to some Scotch. I think you have some experience with Scotch, but probably limited.
Yeah, just a little. It's funny. 15 years ago, I drank a little bit of Scotch, liked it with cigars. Then bourbon craze blew up, and most of my drinking went towards bourbon and rye, and it starts kind of feeling like the same thing one after another. So I'm trying to venture out into the world of Scotch and Japanese just to get a little bit more variety. When you're bound by the strict rules of bourbon, right? There's only so much creativity you can have.
It's interesting for me because I think a lot of Scotch guys I know, and when I was mostly into Scotch at the beginning, I used to think that bourbon is very one-dimensional because of the rules and all the bourbon. I couldn't tell the difference between all the bourbons, but actually, once you get into the bourbon world, it's actually super enjoyable, and there's a huge variety even in that world, right? So I think it's not fair to say that. I understand that there's strict rules, so like it ends up being closer than Scotch for sure. But
Yes.
It's still an extremely enjoyable world. But still, this is my first love, so I'd like to introduce you. So.
Okay.
Cool. So everything we have here is what I consider to be very bourbon friendly. In that, firstly, they are high proof. So if you're a bourbon guy and you like high proof stuff, like this is not going to be some low proof. Watered down experience for you. Secondly, there's no peat in any of these, and they're known to be distilleries that are absolutely no peat, because some other distilleries, they do both peated and non-peated stuff, and then their non-peated stuff actually has some peat. I think the one that I tried the most, that was the most egregious example, was the Bruichladdich, because most of what I do is like Port Charlotte and the Bruichladdich, like Octomores that we have back here, that are the most peated stuff. Even their non-peated stuff tastes super peated, but these are what is known as sherry bombs, right? So they're doused in like copious amounts of sherry, probably super wet casks, because as you can see, they're pretty dark. So they should be, more close to a sherry, to a bourbon experience, in that they're sweet. There's no peat. There's no like crazy briny notes or anything like that. Hopefully. That's you're more sensitive to. So
Okay.
hopefully you enjoy them.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. We were talking about this earlier. I think with Scotch is the note that tends to turn me off is that kind of saltiness, that brininess that you get with some Scotches, and it sounds like your hypothesis is that the sherry on these is going to drown out that brininess note. So we'll see if that proves correct. So to summarize, we're looking at high proof, no peat, high sherry.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And the most famous high proof, no peat, high sherry whiskey that exists is Aberlour Abonat. And this Aberlour Abonat is batch 59. And it's a whiskey that is now creeping up a price. I think when I first bought this, this is one of the first whiskeys I bought. As you know, I have this massive spreadsheet of all the whiskeys that I have, and all the I'm super nerdy about keeping track. And this is so old that I don't have the purchase date, and I don't know when I cracked it. But I think I cracked this 8 or 9 years ago, like or maybe like 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah, it's like a long time ago.
So I know on some of your bottles you use the wine preserver to
I don't think with this one I haven't even used the wine preserver yet.
Okay, interesting.
So it might be a little bit different than obviously when it was first opened, but this is known to be the most stereotypical high proof sherry bomb experience that you could get.
So for the bourbon drinkers in the room, I'm trying to think what is a well-known sherried bourbon?
Sherried bourbon?
Sherried bourbon.
Interesting.
I'm trying to think because
I know recently Costco has Legends, which is a collaboration between when Suntory took over Beam. Now they have the Legends, which is Suntory Beam kind of actually what's it called? Suntory Global Corporation now, and they have this sherry bourbon, which is really great. I don't know if there's any other famous sherry bourbons.
yeah, I'm trying to think. Nothing immediately comes to mind. I know that I've seen a bunch of the sherry finished Courage and Conviction lately, which I think is really good. But that's an American single malt. That's not.
Yeah, and if we're talking about American single malts, my favorite is the Jack Daniels, which is twice barreled, which was also sherry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe not so common in the bourbon world.
So yeah, before I knew a lot about bourbons, I think this was I thought this was the closest experience I could get to a bourbon. So I'm curious to know what you think about it. What are the notes that come to your mind when I smell this? I think like dark prunes, like raisins.
That's exactly right.
It's kind of like lots of dark berry kind of notes.
I think that's right, and that makes sense with the sherry. It's pretty sweet. It's incredibly smooth for the proof. What's the what's
almost 60%? 50 was it
60.9?
60.9, yeah, so 61% almost.
Yeah, this drink's much smoother than that. It's got like really rich notes. It's kind of got that oily mouth coating feel to it.
Yeah.
Kind of short finish though.
Oh, interesting. Lingers for me. I don't know. I think the newer batches of this are getting much more watered down and not as good. And in fact, I had a sample from our good friend Joe, who had a very early sample from one of the local shops around. I think it was like what was it, like batch 19 or something, so really old one, and it was so different, and it was, by the way, not just different but better. So
interesting.
And I've heard that the new batches of this are getting to the same degree that this was worse than the earlier batches or worse than this batch. So unfortunately, as is with most bourbons and whiskeys, it seems like quality is going down as things going up, popularity is going up.
So are any of these particularly hard to get, or are all three of these things that you should be able to find on a shelf?
I would say they're not extremely difficult to find, but they are seasonal. Like if you search for it, probably every year you can get the most recent batch of these. They're not going to be like readily available on every shelf, right? They're what is known as specialty whiskeys, right? They're cask strength, relatively medium market price, right? They're not like cheap, right? They're in the order of like $100 now each. I think the Glendronach is actually over 100. It's like 120 or something. So if you're an enthusiast, you probably won't have too much difficulty finding them. But I think they're not like something that you can readily go and buy from your local convenience store anytime you want. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the raisin note. I also get a little bit of chocolate and like just some dark berries. Sherry's really nice. Do they say what kind of sherry they use?
They don't. I would assume it's all. Oh, it does say Spanish Oloroso.
Okay.
Matured in Spanish Oloroso sherry butts. Yep. Okay, let's try the next one. So the next one is the GlenAllachie 10-year, and this particular one is also a batch product. I think they come up with multiple batches per year now. This one is batch 6, and I think batch 6 was actually a batch that didn't get very high reviews. I still thought it was really great, but it was at a slight discount. This one is a Billy Walker product, so it was made after Billy Walker moved to GlenAllachie. The thing about GlenAllachie you should know is that I think they used to be like mostly like blend filler, not very good or famous. And then Billy Walker, who's a very famous blender and master distiller, he used to be at Glendronach, and he left in 2019-ish, and he moved to GlenAllachie. So now he's the master distiller at GlenAllachie, and he completely changed the profile. He started like putting his own distillate and using like much more high quality sherry casks. And he's very famous for just doing like super sherry stuff, like sherry bomb experiences.
So he pulled this barrel, but he didn't actually contribute to the distillate.
I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
Because it's a 10-year product, so it would have been there before he. Yeah.
I mean, look at the color. It's much darker than the Aberlour.
Yeah. So what I get straight away on this is that there's a sulfur note to it.
It's funky. It's a little bit burnt.
Yeah, there's this is what you call like a sulfur note.
Okay.
And it's well known that a lot of sherry casks and even some high quality sherry casks, if they've been left out too long before they're filled, they could start getting this sulfur note. This is basically that sherry is going bad a little bit, but it does contribute to like a taste that a lot of people like, but it also puts some people off. So if you're sensitive to that sulfur note, you will definitely get a little bit of that on the nose, and
it's much sharper than the Aberlour, which is surprising because it's lower proof.
So what is the proof on this one?
I think you said 50...
57.8. It's not that much. It's like 3%, 4%.
Yeah.
Honestly, like this is one of the less sought after, but I've tried it next to other ones. I don't think it's that much worse. But for me, this Aberlour is where it's at. Like it's just like compared to these two, we'll get to this one. But
so you started with the first one being the best. That's like such a
we should have started
such a letdown.
You're right. But so yeah, if between these two, like I mean, how much worse would you say, or what is your experience differences? I'd like to know your notes.
So, not nearly as much sweetness on this one. It's got a little bit more astringency and bitterness. It's still clearly sherried, right? You still kind of have like some of those like prune raisin type notes. But between the bitterness, kind of the sulfur on the nose, this is not as pleasant of an experience for me. I think it's a material difference.
Okay, understandable. I would have to agree with that, even for me. Okay, so this one is one that this Glendronach cask strength batch. I think this one is batch 10. Oh, this one's batch 11 actually. So this one was made after Billy Walker left Glendronach, so it's under Rachel Barry. Does she have a sign here? No. But yeah, so this one is 59.8% ABV. So, in the middle between those two. Let's see on the nose.
Does not have that sulfur.
There's no sulfur, right?
None.
The sulfur is not there, which is great. I love not having sulfur on it. Well, I have to say, I do like the sulfur every once in a while. Like a lot of Springbanks and Long Rows that are like super sought after have that sulfur note, and that ruggedness is really great, and I do like it. But I also can appreciate not having that, because this is like a very much elegant nose. You'll never get sulfur on a Macallan, for example, right? And this is and Glendronach is, I think, another brand that will never do sulfur on their stuff.
So the sherry influence is there, but doesn't seem as prominent as the other two. The finish goes on forever.
Interesting.
I
get a little bit of citrus notes mixed in with the prunes here as well.
Gosh, I think as far as just like something that would just be incredibly approachable as a bourbon drinker, like this is like the closest.
Interesting.
I think.
Even between these two?
I think this is a more interesting pour, personally, but I think this is probably closer to a bourbon.
Okay. I significantly prefer the Aberlour.
Ooh, I mean,
it's much more like fruity, and the fruity notes to me on this are they remind me of the fruity notes you get on like Buffalo Trace Mash Bill 1 stuff,
Gosh, no, Go back and revisit here. Let's
Yeah.
see.
A lot of like Buffalo Trace mash bill one, like kind of fruitiness. Comparatively, this is like much more citrus, acidic, Scotch-like to me.
Interesting.
As I told you, before I knew much about bourbon, I really thought Aberlour was the closest I could get to a bourbon, and I still kind of feel like obviously now I would not mistake it for a bourbon, but I think it's like the notes are to me the closest that I found to a bourbon.
The Aberlour is much softer. Someone's coming.
All right, someone's coming, and our background just finished up. I guess like final thoughts, Matt. What do you think about? So, what is your order of preference? Like, if you were to recommend to a friend that's like a bourbon lover.
So I think I'd have a hard time between these two. I think you're right. This one has a little bit more citrus. This feels a little bit sharper, but it just I feel like maybe there's just more wood tannin in there.
Oh, there's definitely more wood tannin.
That maybe that's what I'm thinking of is like really just bourbon reminiscent.
I see your point.
This is softer. It probably does have a bit more complexity, a little bit more of like the fruit notes that kind of shine through. I think these are both excellent. I think maybe I personally lean towards the Glendronach, but
interesting.
But marginally, the GlenAllachie was not for me.
Was not for me. Okay, cool. Well, good to know. So, okay, I'll remember that when I have bourbon friends that come over, I gotta introduce them with these first, and then wean them in to the other stuff later.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining this episode, and thank you, Matt, for sharing your experience with us.
Yeah.
And I hope we can do more of these episodes in the future together. So yeah, join us in future times when we'll have more fun episodes for you.
Cool. Cheers.
Cool. Cheers. Let me get the one that I like the most.
Okay.
Cheers. Cool. Well, that sucked that went off. But
your flag ran out on us.
I didn't. Shit. That sucks. All right. Well, it's okay.
I didn't know it was a video.
Yeah. It's like a 10-hour video that
a 10-hour video
fucking in the middle. Yeah. Fuck.